even if you don't know who God is, even if you don't know what Judaism is, listen to something here and just let it move you.
We're dreaming the world to come, spiraling in time, dreaming alive, dreaming alive, dreaming the world to come, dreaming alive, dreaming alive, can you hear our song?
Hi, I'm Rebecca.
I'm Nomi.
And this
is Dreaming
the World
to Come.
This is Dreaming the World to Come, a project where we reimagine time and the ways we relate to it, aligning with ancestral Jewish traditions and honoring the diverse voices and experiences of the diaspora, past, present, and future, and the magnificent humans who have been dreaming of a just world for millennia.
Rebecca and I are both queer, non-binary, white, disabled Jews and Hebrew priestesses or priestesses, and we live in the Pacific Northwest on Squaxin land, also known as the Stechas Village, known colonially as Olympia, Washington.
In addition to this podcast, we create a planner that combines Hebrew, Gregorian, and moon calendars. This year's is called Indwelling Dreams of Olam Haba. This podcast will be coming out at the beginning of each Hebrew month and will include our takes on that month and an interview with a contributor who wrote about that month in the planner.
You don't need the planner to enjoy the podcast, but you can buy it at www.dreamingtheworldtocome.com. We also have a Patreon where you can support us, and that allows us to continue making this podcast and paying the contributors and editors and ASL interpreters. And you can join for as little as $1 a month. And then you get access to the full conversation with our contributor, which there's so much wisdom that they share with us every month. And we would love for you to be able to receive all of that. So if you want that, join our Patreon, or also, if you're a Jewish person of color and you want access to the full interview, just send us an email at elementalactivation@gmail.com. The Patreon is patreon.com/dreamingtheworldtocome. So, Rebecca, we are heading into the month of Kislev, and Kis means pocket, Lev means heart. So it's a pocket heart, which has this feeling of like tenderness and intimacy and holding our dreams close to our hearts and kind of going inside, going internal. Kislev is also the month where Hanukkah happens at the end of the month, but I don't think we're going to talk too much about Hanukkah. There's lots of information in the world about Hanukkah. We are going to focus more on the darkness and dream time and kind of like visioning prophecy aspects of Kislev.
Yeah, the dark often gets shunned. Our culture is scared of it. I love what Ray Abalea wrote last year for the planner and shared a quote from our teacher, Sheikh Dr. Ibrahim Baba of beloved memory. And Baba talks about the demonization of the dark and says, demonization of the dark is at the root of body hatred, hatred of women and their bodies, destruction of peoples, the colors of the earth, fear and hatred of the erotic, queer, transphobia, Islamophobia, Judeophobia, fear and hatred of paganism and earth-based traditions, fear and hatred of people with disabilities, fear of wombs, fear of tombs. And Ray says, the luminous dark is the place of both death and birth.
Yeah.
And I love that framing.
It makes me sad. And it also, it's nice to actually just hear that articulated, how so much of the oppression that so many of us experience is based in this fear of the dark and just kind of the squishy internal unknown places of our bodies and the earth. You know, I think, yeah, we all grow up taught a fear of that we have to then learn how to reorient to and learn how to love in order to be liberated or empowered.
Yeah, I also wonder about what's the right fear of the dark, or a balanced, like right-sized fear of the dark. The unknown, what you don't see in the shadows, you know, for ancient humans has always been real. Like, oh yeah, something could jump out and chase you, or, you know, like there's that fear. We have that fear for a reason too.
I was also just thinking about the ways that we can use the dark to be the thing that's hiding or that might jump out, or, you know, like the power in that. What are the ways that being comfortable in the darkness gives us a kind of power that is scary to the establishment, and the ways that that can both be demonized and used in oppressive ways? You know, I feel like that's a lot of what anti-Semitism is based in, is thinking that like Jews are behind the scenes, like manipulating things, you know, off screen, or like witches are like casting spells on you. But it's like, well, what does it mean to be someone who maybe has less power on an institutional level? And so we inhabit these places of darkness in order to access a different kind of power. I just had this sense of like being in that place of that kind of power and having like a hand held out. Like, it is possible to not be afraid, you know? And it's like, in order to be in our own wholeness, like being able to reach back towards that hand.
I feel Baba really embodied that in their living life. Was they are someone who related with everyone. To me, that relationality that they were able to act out in life really showed the work that they did to work through those fears. Like, I feel like there was like no one that Baba didn't in some way relate with. And they let it be known. Like, I remember one time I was talking about doing performance art. Well, they saw me do that piece where I was in the mountain for Shavuot and came out like speaking at the mountain. And then not that night, but another time, started talking to me about like performance art that they did. I was like, oh my God, you have done everything. Like, you had your hand in everything. And I just remember being like kind of flabbergasted, you know, and just so seen and felt so connected. And like, I'm going to cry because I just was like, me, who felt very different in our lived experiences from Baba, but still found a way to really intimately connect with me.
I had that experience with Baba too. Ibrahim Baba loved what they called my fierceness, and like the ways that I sometimes feel like the ways that I show up in spiritual space is not like squishy enough or something, or not like, I mean, I definitely have my squishy and soft and sweet aspects, and I also have some like kind of hard edges. And I felt that part of myself really loved and really seen as like a spiritual gift by Baba. And yeah, that's so much like both of those stories are like Baba reaching out a hand towards these parts of ourselves that might feel separate. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. And just the desire to weave that web that they embodied, that still lives in us, that we still continue to continue weaving the web that they started.
Baba died in 2016, I believe, in February of 2016, and was a really incredible teacher and continues to be a teacher. Like, I didn't even know we were going to talk about Baba really here, and that's like, it feels so core now to this conversation. You know, in our interview with Hadar, she talks about prophecy as this core aspect of her Jewishness and her spirituality and relationship to God. And I feel like all of this stuff around fear of the dark, around dreams and visions is all kind of like intertangled with our movement towards calling in the world to come as well. And Kislev gives us an opportunity to make a lot of these connections and let it kind of stew and digest in the dark for a while.
I think that's a good transition to talking about dreams and sleep time, which are so revered in Jewish practice and culture. There's this acknowledgement of the preciousness and sacredness of dream and sleep time in the prayers that we say before we go to bed and when we wake up. The angel prayer that we say before we go to bed, we invoke the angels and invite them to surround us and protect us when we sleep. And then we wake up and we sing Moda Ani and we give thanks for our life immediately, wash our hands and our
We're
face.
being returned back
thanks.
into consciousness in this way, back into our bodies.
Yeah, and using water to help with the transition. And with the angel's prayer, using our hands, there are movements that go along with that prayer to welcome the physicality of their presence.
I think you were the first person that told me that you sing that prayer every night before bed. And I started doing it. It's really helped me in times where, like, I remember at one point when I was put on steroids because of a jaw issue and it triggered a manic episode. And I could feel the old feeling of like this aspect of myself wanting to kind of like jump out of my body. And I could feel those angels that I've been invoking every night, like holding me in place, like having that sense of place. And I think like talking about dreams, like, I feel like there's really a lot of honoring for the miracle that we go traveling when we sleep. We like go all kinds of places and then are able to return back into our bodies and share about those places. There's a Jewish dreaming practice that we learned through Kohenet, and actually Jill Hammer has a whole book about it called Under Torah. And the practice is, first of all, that you always say, no matter what kind of dream it is, you say, I've seen a good dream. And that just like helps hold it as a gift and honor the energies for the gifts that they're bringing us. And then you tell your dream. It's not about the symbolicness of the dream, and it's not about trying to tell someone what it means. Instead, you occupy the dream in your own imagination and say, in my dream of this dream, and kind of like retell the parts of the dream that speak to you in your own imagination. And it does this thing that is different than trying to, quote, understand something, is to actually like inhabit that place from multiple perspectives and have it expand beyond the psychology of your own mind, you know? I've had really transformative experiences with it. I highly recommend that book.
I also really like, there's a Talmudic practice of that when you have a bad dream, you should tell it to people and then they tell it back to you as a good dream so that it's not a nightmare or a bad dream anymore. And that kind of cancels out the negativity.
Or expands it and brings it into wholeness.
A lot of our dreams are prophetic, and even if they're not something that will happen in real time in our waking lives, we're working something out in the universe through them, and things change. You know, like you get a psychic reading or something and you're like, oh, that's the future for me. But then you could get a reading from the same person like the next day and they will give you a different reading of the future because so much just changes through us living and collaborating with the universe.
I think a lot about the piece that Jonah wrote for the 5781 Golden Dreams of Olam Haba planner, where they offered this dream portal practice That's so sweet, like having a little, like a teacup by your bed that might have like some rocks and water in it, and using that teacup as a portal to your dreams. And that the dream portal practice is more about connecting to the feeling and letting that little container of the teacup or whatever you choose to use be a container that can help hold and connect with that feeling. And I'll sometimes have like be dreaming about like the same place every night for like a week or two. And there's nothing to figure out about it necessarily, but there is this feeling of like, I'm being asked to collaborate with my subconscious or with the universe in some way to move with this energy. And so I appreciate those kinds of tools and invitations to engage with dreams without having to like know what they are.
Yeah, and I often talk with people who don't remember their dreams of other ways of working with the subconscious of sleep. So if you wake up in the night or you wake up in the morning and you hear a sound or you see the first thing you look at or the first thought you have or a memory that comes up, that those can be clues to your subconscious and in a way you're dreaming time because you're dreaming even if you don't remember them. Yeah, the other practice I wanted to share for remembering dreams is that when you're awake, eliciting the feeling of being in a dream, looking at your hands can be a way to elicit that kind of feeling. And just practicing that in your daily life can help you remember your dreams. Or if you are dreaming and you want to lucid dream, you can build your practice that way.
And lucid dreaming, for those who might not know, is when you have the sense of being conscious and in control of your dreams, or like being able to like make choices in a more present way inside of your dreams. I will say that my experience is usually once I'm lucid dreaming, I kind of, it gets a little boring because I guess I don't have enough experience of it to really be able to have a lot of skill in navigating.
Yeah, maybe having less control in our dreams is to be desired.
Maybe. I like, you know, a lot of Rabbi Jill Hammer's practices are around receiving visitations and different kinds of visitations from different kinds of entities. And that feels less like being in control and more like being open and receptive, which is a good practice for me. I also know that having done a lot of hallucinogens in my life, that cultivating that sense of dreaming in my waking life was a big aspect of having used hallucinogens. It's like I'm seeing these themes and the ways that things are coming together in my waking life that feel like a dream. And that's actually part of how reality is and part of how reality works.
Dreaming alive, dreaming alive, dreaming the world to come.
Hadar, hello. I'm so excited to be talking with you today.
Hi, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
We've been really excited.
I'm going to just read a bio to get us started and orient people to who you are. Hadar Cohen, she, her, is a Mizrahi feminist, multimedia artist, healer, and educator. She's a Jewish mystic who works to build decolonial frameworks for worshiping God. Hadar teaches Jewish scripture and embodied practices through her own mystical devotional school called Malchut. She's an artist, and her mediums include performance, movement, writing, weaving, sound, and ritual. Check out her work at hadarcohen.me and on Instagram, where she has a very active account at hadarcohen32. Welcome, Hadar.
Welcome, Hadar.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're just talking about all the different things that you offer. There's this combination of this really embodied relationship to God and the divine, and then your work around anti-Semitism and your work around Palestinian solidarity, and just how powerful and important your voice is, and just really so appreciating the work that you're doing on all these fronts. Like, I personally have benefited from them, and I know a lot of people are really listening to you.
Yeah, it's really, I just want to say that it's really nice to be in this space because it's because of the work that I'm doing. I think within myself, I feel so rooted in my Jewishness and in my belonging to Judaism. But then given the political climate that we are in, it's like sometimes strange to be like, okay, who's my Jewish community? Where am I understood? Where am I appreciated? Because we're really working through a lot as a larger Jewish community. So yeah, it's just always so moving and touching to be so warmly received by other Jews.
Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
It's so important to learn how to root in our spiritual wisdom and our tradition. And something that I think a lot about is around this relationship to mystery and to the unknown, which is really related to what I wrote for the piece, which is the month of Kislev. And I think about this also sometimes with the weaponization of religion and extremism that, is happening all over the world with so many different religions. But there's kind of this notion of like, we understand God and God said this in scripture. So let me tell the world that this is our right. And, to me, that feels like a really, just distorted understanding of God, because part of, the mystical journey of being in relationship to God is being in surrender and in the unknown and allowing the divine to lead. And actually, like, we don't know what the plan is. We don't know what liberation is going to look like. We don't know anything, actually. So we have to learn to really let go of so much of what we think is right. And this is really, this month of Kislev, which is the inner dream. It's the month filled with the longest nights in the Hebrew calendar year. So there's a time that we say in Judaism that we move into this moon dominance time because the night is longer, so the moon is shining more. And, in Judaism, we love the moon. It teaches us so much. So yeah, to me, this is kind of core. I mean, this feels very like a feminist lens around how to embrace the moon, how to embrace the subconscious, how to embrace the unknown, this more shadowy dimensions of life. How do we actually open up to it and let it guide us and stop being so scared of it, right? There's so much fear of the feminine that's like really hardcore in our time. And so, I really love this invitation that we have in Kislev, which is how do we open up into our subconscious? How do we use the guidance of the moon? How do we use this invitation into the dreamland, into the internal world? And this to me is the heart of mysticism.
Oh, I love that, because I feel like what you're doing with the planner too, and to us, the planner, it's more than a planner. It's about community, about helping people find a space of belonging if they haven't found that in other places in Judaism or Jewish community. And I feel like you're invoking an invitation deeper into the dreaming of the whole project.
Yeah. And, I think this is so related to the prophetic lineage in Judaism. Throughout Jewish history, we have different roles around different Jewish leaders. And in the modern age, we really settled on this rabbinic role, like the rabbi is the classic model of Jewish leadership. But that's not the only model that we have in Judaism, right? We have the prophet, we have the priestess, we have so many different ways of communal leadership. And I think also so much of my work is bless the rabbis, we love the rabbis. And how do we also have other forms of Jewish leadership? And I think this prophetic lineage, which is a truth-telling lineage, a justice-oriented one, it's like so many Jews, I feel, are looking for this. They're like, okay, what is the prophetic truth? Prophecy is usually very uncomfortable to hear because there's risk there. There's things that we need to let go of in order to come into the greater truth. But I think that there's something that is happening right now in the subconscious around this revival of this Jewish prophetic lineage. And I think a lot of people are really asking, what does that mean? What does that mean to not just be a religion of, the people of the books, but also the people of action, the people of justice, the people of listening, the people of direct relationship with God. These are things that I really care about. And it's funny because sometimes people are like, oh, Hadar, will you be my rabbi? And I'm like, I'm not a rabbi. That's not my vibe. I'm into the prophetic and priestly lineages. People are really in this vulnerable place because it's like they want to reconnect to Judaism. They don't know exactly how or what that means. They don't know where to turn to. And then sometimes they go into these Jewish institutions and they have this very rigid way of like Jewishness that comes also with a certain political lifestyle, or even just like a like more patriarchal view. There's so much wrestling we have to do around Judaism and Jewishness and patriarchy, and how do we really like take patriarchy out of our midst. And for me, I feel like, okay, first of all, we need to talk about the trauma of assimilation, because that's a trauma. It comes from centuries of oppression and also US political dynamics. So let's first hold sensitivity and space for what that means. And then second, how do we actually understand that there's been so much rupture in terms of learning scripture, in terms of understanding what even our holidays are about, to understanding Hebrew, like all these things. So it's not just about rebuilding those skill set, but it's also about like, how do we return to our own inner wisdom and let that guide us, instead of constantly being dependent on the leader or the rabbi or the institution. When I teach a lot of Jewish mysticism, I teach a lot of Torah and scripture. And, a lot of times I have Jewish people coming to my classes and they feel so scared and so intimidated to even just learn one line, because they're like, I don't even know what any of this means. And I really try to be like, okay, let's just listen to the body. It's okay if you don't know all of it. I mean, Jewish tradition is so expansive. There's so much. None of us know all of it. But it's like, how do we regain this intimacy with our tradition and feeling like really we belong to it and it belongs to us?
Yeah, that intimacy.
I just got back from Jerusalem, and I was born in Jerusalem. And both my grandparents passed, but they were people that were super important in my understanding of Judaism. My grandma was like so filled with unconditional love. My grandfather was like so devotional and deep in prayer. It's really interesting because when he passed, he was, a pretty well-respected prayer leader in Jerusalem. And I found like all these letters that community members wrote about him after his death. And there was this one guy who was like, I never believed in God. I don't really understand what Judaism is, but like, I would show up every Shabbat just to hear you sing, because there was something in your voice that just connected me to God immediately. And I didn't need to like believe in God to feel it. And yeah, I just,
that's so awesome.
I just like feel like that's my lineage around like, even if you don't know who God is, even if you don't know what Judaism is, listen to something here and just let it move you. There's a lot of grief and sadness that I'm still holding around the loss of my grandparents, because it would have been so cool. My grandfather died when I was like 5, but it would have been super cool to have him as my spiritual mentor. He still is.
Like he still is. Yeah.
He was actually like such a deep guide for me in my Jewish spiritual life. I think they really kind of knew like who I would become. So they just left me so much resource, and especially as a Jewish person, I feel so blessed by this. And my grandfather, he was a singer. So I have all of his tapes of him learning how to sing Jewish prayer. He would sing in Arabic and Ladino and Hebrew. I have all his notebooks of him like trying to make sense of this music.
It's like you could go to school with him through that and learn, be directly mentored.
Yeah, I really feel like I have a whole school that I've inherited. But on the other hand, there's also just that grief process. And I think that's something that I'm still kind of working out with my relationship to Judaism. Whether I want it or don't want it, like the Jewish tradition is just never leaving me. Even if there's moments where I'm like, okay, I'm going to run away. It's just here. It's in my body. It's in my dreams. It's in my speech. It's this aliveness, but I'll also be honest that it's like, I just got back from Jerusalem, and it's really hard because I was there for the high holiday season, and it's so challenging being there, seeing what is being done in the name of Judaism, because you end up feeling so frustrated and so upset. And then it's really hard to celebrate Jewish holidays there, which is so ironic because it's supposed to be this Jewish state, Jewish Liberation Project, whatever, but it's not, because it just feels so horrible to celebrate Sukkot while seeing what was happening to Palestinians in the same day. So then I have this experience of like, I don't want to celebrate these holidays, you know, this like kind of rebellion against it.
Yeah.
It's just a sad thing, because I'm like, okay, if I really want to practice my Jewish holidays, like I can't be in Jerusalem, which is such a strange reality. You know, it's such a heartbreak around how the Israeli state turned Arabic into the language of the enemy, or like this terrorist language, because Arabic is such a Jewish language. Like there's so much of our tradition written in Arabic. And now we basically just lost connection to all of that because Arabic was just like wiped off our tongue. I remember in Tel Aviv, there's like these songs of peace circles, and they do these like, oh, let's sing songs in all languages. So they literally have 10 different languages, like Spanish, Russian, Portuguese, Italian, so many languages, and Arabic is not included. It's really wild to me. Wild is, you know, an understatement, but
also so painful.
And there's another thing that exists, that actually there's a deep love that Palestinians have for Judaism, because it was part of Palestine. It was part of the Arab world.
Yes.
And I think this is where, you know, in the Jewish community, we get tripped up. You know, this is so much of my work. I think that's why my work is so successful in this way, because for so long in the Jewish community, when we did solidarity work with Palestinian community, we just centered the Ashkenazi experience. You know, in Hebrew, you have this phrase called the Brit Ashkenazit Palestinit, the covenant between Ashkenazim and Palestinians. So it's like this covenant that it's like, we're going to come together and like leave out the Mizrahi, leave out the Arab Jews.
Wow.
And you see, politically, it just doesn't work because there's too many gaps. And even I have so many of my Palestinian friends, you know, they say this to me. They're like, we know from our grandparents that they had Jewish friends. We grew up on these stories. And now it's like there's this rupture and this pain and suppression, the separation, all of it. So I think that there's a lot of dynamics there going on that we really need to break down. And, you know, so much of my work, not just in Palestine, but the wider Arab region, is around this reconnection to Jewishness. And I think a lot of non-Jewish Arabs feel it. They feel the loss of what happened when Arab Jews were displaced and Judaism was pretty much like ruptured from so many of the lands. So this is part of my frustration. Like it would make the most sense in Jewish community when we do Palestine solidarity work to center Arab Jews, because who else are you going to center right now? You know, right. But that hasn't happened. That hasn't been happening, both because there's so much racism in our community towards Arab Jews. You know, sometimes in the political left Jewish space, there's this leftist Ashkenazi Jews, like they love Palestinians, but they hate Arab Jews. And you're just like, how does this make any sense? And it's really unpleasant history and dynamic. You know, I had a recent Palestinian friend who's been part of activism work for a long time. And, you know, after Oslo, there was all these Israel-Palestine dialogue groups that came, and they basically excluded Mizrahim, Arab Jews, from being part of it. It was just Ashkenazi Jews talking to Palestinians, which is part of why it didn't work at all. But I have a Palestinian friend who's been basically involved with that for most of his life. And he said to me recently, you know, ever since I was a kid, I asked, where are the Mizrahim? Why aren't they part of this conversation? And they just told us that the Mizrahim were too right-wing to join. And the level of heartbreak I felt when I heard that, I was like, ouch. First of all, Ashkenazim speaking on our behalf around our politics. And second of all, this larger racial dynamic that happens, that like people in the Jewish community just blame Mizrahim for Zionism, for right-wing Zionism, and completely hide that actually was started in Europe, that it's actually largely Ashkenazim who are enacting the settler colonialism, that are in the Knesset, that are in the parliament, that are in high offices in the IDF. And it's like, oh, the Mizrahim are right-wing. And then we're excluded from conversations with Palestinians. So it's like, until we really rupture and dismantle that dynamic, we're not going to be able to move much. And then what ends up happening in the Mizrahi community, in the Arab Jewish community, is that we feel so much resentment. We've been systematically excluded from this work for decades, even though we're also wounded by Zionism. But it's like the reason why we're not included in this conversation is because then we're going to actually have to bring up Zionism as a racial dynamic, as a form of racism. And the Jewish community is not ready to have that. You know, there's all these ways of Ashkenazi dominance that is really subtle. So it's like just being told over and over again that we're not allowed to bring our traditions, we're not allowed to bring our melodies, we're not allowed to bring this Arabic vibe because it triggers people. And then being excluded of the racial justice conversation, having Jewish communities not want to engage with Zionism as a racial project. And then, you know, on the occasion that they want to do cultural diversity things, they're like, well, how about you bring, you know, some yummy Sephardic dish to share. You're like, that doesn't work. You don't know anything about our histories. You don't care anything about our traumas. And you're not really willing to seriously engage with what is happening to our community. I get so worked up about this because I'm like, soon, very similar to like the Holocaust survivor generation soon dying out. So it's like everyone's wanting to capture their stories. Soon also the generation of Arab Jews who actually lived in Baghdad, who lived in Cairo, who lived in Aleppo, who lived in all these places are also going to die out. And like, we need to have a massive archival project around this, but we just don't. And just to add a layer of that, so in Europe, modernity very much created this rupture between secular and religious. But this is not something that Arab Jews really had to struggle with because we weren't affected by modernity in the same way. So when you see this with Mizrahi lineage communities, it's like they're so comfortable just having Shabbat in a very traditional way and then going to a film or going to a party. Like there's no contradiction in their mind around this, you know, and especially like my lineage also, because we were integrated into the Arab region. So there's so much there around both like our being able to hold so many worlds together and have them not contradict. And then also this sensual, mystical way of relating to Judaism, right? And I think that those are such deep teachings for the whole Jewish community right now. Yeah. So I think we have a lot to offer. This is my pitch for why you should include Arab Jews in your solidarity work.
Yes.
Sold.
I think that one thing that I also work a lot with, and for years I've been lonely around it, but now I feel like there's more of community developing around it, which is this integration and intersection of spirituality and justice, which feels really vital. And it feels like the heartbeat of the world to come. Because really it's like sometimes what we see in justice communities is people are really upset about oppression, which we all are, you know, it's really intense, the different systemic forms of oppression. But oftentimes we're not rooted in this spiritual understanding of divinity, of the flow of life, of this larger perspective. So we get really caught in our personal traumas. We get really caught in our ways of like critique culture of judgment, really tearing each other down. You know, there's a lot of really toxic patterns there. And then also we see in the spiritual community, right, we see all these little teachers who are really scared to touch racial justice, they're really scared to touch gender issues because they're like, oh, we'll just focus on how we're all one. And that's not okay either. So what's this way of rooting in spiritual wisdom, in understanding that there is interconnection between all human life, that is the fabric of creation, and that is our source of healing also, right? It's not isolating away from the world and just, you know, spiraling in our own personal traumas or our own community traumas, but it's actually, how do we understand this interconnection? How do we understand how God lives through all? And not just an abstract way, but like a lived way, right? Like a lived, actualized way, which means we're going to have to deal with some justice issues, which includes going through the many levels of suffering that exist on this human plane, right? We cannot walk away from that because we are on Earth, and Earth is a very complicated place. And part of the dynamics of this place is really understanding and reckoning with human pain and oppression. But if we don't do that from a spiritual perspective, we're going to be drowned by the intensity of the violence. So we need to hold on to God really strongly while we do this work.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your wisdom. and blessings on all your work. Everyone go follow Hadar and sign up for all of her classes and enjoy the inspiration and wisdom.
Hadar, Hadar HaNeviah, Hadar, Hadar HaNeviah, Shalom Aleich, Shalom Aleich, HaNeviah Shel Shechina. Thank you, Hadar HaNeviah.
Thank you. Wow, I need that as my alarm clock every morning.
I'll call you. I'll send you a voice memo.
Dreaming alive, dreaming alive, dreaming the world to come.
Olive meditation for Kislev. The word for olive in Hebrew is zayit. Take a few deep breaths and imagine an old olive tree, gnarled branches, roots deep into earth, waxy leaves, and the hard fruit with hard pits. Kislev is olive season in Palestine, and often a time when Israel attacks our beloved Palestinian friends and keeps them from their harvest by uprooting their plants, their trees, and disrupting the community harvest. So as we breathe into the grief of the olive trees that have been uprooted, we call on the golden light of olive oil, the light made by the oil that produced the miracle of Hanukkah. And we pray together that olive trees flourish, that their fruits are harvested in peace. And like the dove from the Torah that brought a branch of olive as a symbol of peace and safety, may this tree be protected. Beloved olive, tree of light, of celestial glow, of miracles, tree of the heart, who anoints us, enchants us, sourcer of sun, of solidity, the source of all light and life. You call us to acts of justice, and through these acts, we are anointed into your holy sanctuary. Breathing in this blessing, this incantation, honoring olive trees that can live to 1,000 years old, that know the mystery of time, feeling our gratitude for the oil that infuses our meals and our bodies. Thank you, Olive.
Dreaming alive, dreaming the world to come.
This is the part of our podcast where we talk about inspiring projects that are building the world to come that we want to see. So here we go with This Way to Olam Haba. This month, we want to talk about the olive harvest in Palestine. This is the time of year where people are doing the olive harvest, and the desecration of olive trees and this huge important part of Palestinian culture and economy from the Israeli government includes uprooting and cutting down over 800,000 olive trees and continued harassment and violence of people harvesting every year by the Israeli government and by settlers. So this year I was reading an article about Palestinians, all different ages of Palestinians getting together for the harvest and working to bring mass amounts of people there in order to help deter Israeli violence, to deter them stopping the olive harvest from happening or interrupting it. I thought was really beautiful and inspiring how the community comes together throughout generations for the harvest, and also extremely saddened of the need to use all different kinds of strategies just to do this basic thing of gathering sustenance and olives to make olive oil and support people financially in their lives.
I know we try to always buy Palestinian olive oil as much as we can, and the brands that we were using have become unavailable. And if folks can buy Palestinian olive oil, it supports those communities. When we talk about trees in Palestine, it just reminds me of the way that so many of us, like American Jews, have been kind of duped by the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, to support these colonial projects of tearing out olive trees and then planting. Traditionally, for many years, it was only like monospecies of pine trees that is not good for that ecosystem or that land, and putting like Jewish people's names on them and just kind of like covering up the villages and the olive groves that were there and putting plaques saying, this is this historical site from the Bible. And as a kid, I would often be told, like, time to collect tzedakah money, and that money all went to the JNF. And I remember my grandma giving me certificates. We'll probably talk about this maybe more in Shavuot because of Tu B'Shvat, the holiday of trees. But one thing that people can do now and anytime, I just went and made a donation while we were talking about this a minute ago, is go to the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights. They have a campaign to plant olive trees. So you can kind of almost do the same thing where you're like, oh, I want to dedicate this to so-and-so. You can even like download a certificate that says that you planted an olive tree. And we made a tiny URL that makes it easy for you to find. So it's tinyurl.com/plant an olive tree.
Plant an olive tree.
Yeah. Let's support Palestinian families and these ancient groves of amazing trees. If you are not familiar with olive trees, look them up. They're really beautiful.
And they can live to like 1,000 years old. You could make a tzedakah box and have that money go to U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights, planting olive trees.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Oh my gosh, I'm going to see my niece this coming weekend, and she is a year and a half from her bat mitzvah and starting to think about it. I'm like, oh, maybe that can be part of her bat mitzvah in some way.
Beautiful. And now a couple of announcements. We have a Patreon, and you can visit us there. Patreon is a platform to support small projects and makers like us in getting this podcast up and going and paying for our expenses like editing and ASL interpretation, and paying our contributors for the interviews. you can become a member and support this podcast. We'd be very grateful for you to do that at patreon.com/dreaming the world to come. And you can become a member at any level. And when you do, you will get access to the full interview with our contributors. So you'll hear all the behind the scenes conversation that didn't get edited down and cut. And this month, Hadar is a wealth of knowledge and inspiration. So you don't want to miss the whole conversation.
And we are having a Hanukkah sale, so you can get all the planners that you need to give to all of your friends for Hanukkah. There's still plenty of time to use and enjoy the planner. It's on sale for $36, which is double high. And you just go to our website, dreamingtheworldtocome.com. You don't need a discount code, just that's the price now. It's on sale. Enjoy.
Enjoy the sale.
Enjoy the sale. It's for you.
Enjoy it.
Have a great time at the sale.
Good time. Double high sale.
It's our double high Hanukkah blowout sale.
Have a great time. Have a really good time.
Have so much fun. It's just a blast. To go in the dark with the light is to know the light. To know dark, go without sight. And find that the dark too moves and breathes, and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings. To go in the dark with the light is to know the light. To know dark, go without sight. And find that the dark too moves and breathes, and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings.